Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Hillsborough Board of Commissioners April workshop. And we are still meeting remotely due to the public health crisis, but whether you are here on the screen or tuning in via YouTube, we are glad you are here. And we can open this work session with our roll call.
Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Commissioner English.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Here.
Commissioner Hughes.
Present.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
I am also here. Great to have everyone here. Moving on to item number 2, agenda changes and approval. I know we have one addition. Commissioner Hughes, do you have an addition tonight?
Yes, I would like to amend the agenda, and I guess that would create 4A, which would be the budget mini retreat, and then 4B, which would be discussion of the procurement and placement of flags in recognition of Pride Month for June.
Great, thank you.
I didn't understand what he said. He wanted to amend the what?
Just to amend
Okay.
the agenda to add discussion about procuring flags to put up for Pride Month in June.
Oh, okay. I missed the Friday part.
No worries. Someday we'll be in the same room and this will all be a little bit simpler, I think. What's the pleasure of this board?
Move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Kathleen, a second by Mark. Hearing no further discussion, we can have the roll call.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
Commissioner English.
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd.
And the agenda is approved unanimously. And moving on to item number 3, the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of this board?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Moved by Kathleen, seconded by Evelyn. We can roll call the consent agenda.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
Commissioner English.
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd.
And the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Moving on to item number 4, in-depth discussion and topics. We have another budget mini retreat. Oh, I see Jen is raising her hand. Sorry, not me. Go ahead, Jen. Is she in here?
Yeah, I was trying to bring her in. She should
Okay,
be-
sorry.
There we go. That's okay.
There she is.
Hello, sorry about that. It's a little bit of a lag there.
No problem. Welcome.
Thank you. And I just wanted to also mention that Emily Bradford, our budget director, is also on this call, and she can jump in as she wishes. But I just wanted to kick off our April mini retreat. This is the 3rd one that we've had as part of this budget cycle. And we have 4 topics for discussion for this evening. The first is on strategic plan values, and then we'll talk about the check-in schedule for the strategic plan. And then we have a topic on water and sewer utility fees with our utilities director, Marie Stranwitz. And then the final topic is on organizational restructure, and Margaret and Eric will take the lead on that. So I'm sort of serving in an MC capacity this evening, but if it's okay with the board, just going down kind of item by item. And then we can have discussion on those 4 topics.
See
All
lots of
right.
nodding of heads, so go for it.
Perfect. Well, the first one is on strategic plan values. As you may remember, we talked about the strategic plan values back in February, and the board provided some feedback to Mayor Weaver and Commissioner English to provide some recommended suggestions on that. So with that, I will turn it over to the 2 of you.
Thanks, Jen. I'm gonna share my screen, and this won't take long. And Rob, please chime in or pull this away from me at any moment. Just thought I'd share my screen since I had it here. Okay, so this reflects just exactly what folks should have in your packet. And the last time that we talked about this, there were a couple of things, some feedback that folks had. One of them was on the vibrancy issue. Mark brought up the point that it would be great to have some way to make it more inclusive of all abilities. And Mark, also you please chime in if I'm not reflecting back your intentions as and remembering correctly. And so we can see we added this sentence: the community can find ways to participate and connect from both inside and outside their homes, trying to get at the idea that there are ways to be involved in a vibrant community that might not always be visible, but that there are different ways of being connected to the town and the essence of Hillsborough. And then also deleted this phrase up here about the activity being visible and frequent, because it's not always going to be visible, but it seems that the lively and active kind of gives the picture we're talking about what it would look like, in our public spaces. So there's that piece, and I can't see everyone. So Rob, did you want to add anything there, or Mark?
No, I think you covered it. It looks good.
And yeah, I agree. Thank you, Mayor Jen, for those changes. That I think that's pretty good.
All right. And then moving down to forward thinking, you might remember that Rob suggested that we actually, include the word or some form of the word sustainability in really getting at what we're talking about, especially when we are moving forward into a comprehensive sustainability plan. It's in the name there. That's going to be a big part of what we're doing in the foreseeable future. So added this phrase, over generations for a sustainable Hillsborough. And I think that Kathleen had a great point that in some ways we're already saying what we mean by that, but we've got sustainable and then followed by what we mean by that. And then added the phrase climate change, because that does seem like such a clear and present issue that we're going to be tackling in our town operations and communicating about in the community. So, Rob, anything to add there?
No, but thank you for finding a way to get sustainable in there.
And that's really it for any changes, but happy for additional comments or suggestions if folks have them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone. Any other comments, questions? Matt?
I latched on to where it says under equity and inclusion, all races, ethnicities, genders, sexes, etc. I think that instead of genders, gender identification would be good. I think that gender is usually viewed as being binary, and by saying gender identification, that allows us to hone in on maybe a greater set of people who may actually identify with no gender, but therefore they don't, to say that of all genders when someone doesn't identify with one just seems a little odd.
That's great feedback, Matt. And I do think language evolves over time. And I think you're bringing up a prime example of that. So I think that's a good suggestion. Anything else? All right. Well, I think we can make that change and I can kick it back to MC Jen.
Great, thank you. All right, so rolling on to our next topic, we wanted to come to the board and just talk a little bit about a proposed schedule for when the board can talk about the strategic plan during the year. So kind of a structured check-in opportunity. Included that proposed plan in the packet, but just to walk through it a little bit sequentially from the end of the fiscal year. So thinking about the upcoming fiscal year in fall, the fall check-in, what we're proposing is that it serves sort of the role that our Hillsborough results, year-end results report served, which was to really talk about the previous fiscal year's accomplishments related to initiatives for the strategic plan, and an opportunity to update the board on what we were able to accomplish, and the things that we weren't able to accomplish, really provide additional information about why that was, whether that was due to lack of resources or challenges that came up. So just an opportunity to update the board on that, as well as the performance measures for each of the strategic objectives. What were the results for the ones that we are able to update on an annual basis? And also an opportunity for the board to provide feedback, so to ask questions on and get clarification on any of the results, as well as have conversations about any proposed changes to prioritization or strategy for the upcoming year. And then we also thought it would be a good opportunity to have a conversation about any mid-year budget requests. So for those things that kind of would be outside of the traditional budget amendments that have to be done, either some of the more significant items that come up during the year that don't need to be addressed immediately, but should be addressed before the upcoming budget process cycle. So just have a chance to check in on those mid-year requests that come up. And as part of that, staff would also provide the current year's unfunded requests so that the board can compare some of those new opportunities that have come up mid-year with the things that weren't able to be funded in the current year. And so that would be what we're proposing to be the fall check-in on the strategic plan. So then in the spring, we're recommending a second check-in with the board, and it might align with the budget retreat depending on how the timing works out. But what we envision for that is to really talk through the third year of the strategic plan. So just a reminder that our strategic plan period will follow our multi-year forecast. So for example, for this upcoming strategic plan, it would be FY22 to 24. And so then as we move into the next fiscal year, it would roll into FY23 to 25. And so FY25 would be that new year where we would be discussing what the board wants to include as far as initiatives for FY25. And then it would also reflect any adjustments that came out of the fall discussion on any board changes to strategy and prioritization. So it would reflect those things that came out of the fall check-in. And so those are the kind of two touch points that we're proposing for the strategic plan, but wanted to open it up for thoughts, comments, questions, concerns that the board may have.
Questions from the board or comments? Mark, go ahead.
It just seems like a reasonable approach.
Mhm.
I like the ability to have, periodic reviews. Help make sure we're on track.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hughes?
Yes, and I agree with Commissioner Bell, and I was honing in on the fall update about the performance measures. Um, will that be when you will identify the performance measures, or will we kind of have an idea of what those performance measures are in the spring?
Yes, so as part of the strategic plan development, there'll be performance measures that the board will approve. And then so in the fall, we would, for the ones that can be updated, we'll update the board on the results of what those performance measures were, on the results for those. And then certainly if there's things that need to be added, that can also be a discussion point if there's something that's missing that the board wants to start tracking. Yes.
And is the recommendation more or less to, even after we adopt the strategic plan, that we just do this twice yearly check-in on where we are?
Yes. Yeah. So the thought is that it's going to be kind of a living document that even though we're doing that 3-year planning period, it's something that the board is revisiting and having that time for that structured conversation around it, getting updates on the results. And then also if there's any need to shift things around, having those conversations as well will be important. So we're all on the same page about what the priorities are. Mayor Weaver.
I have a comment and a question. So my question, I just want to be sure that I'm understanding that the timing exactly. So in looking at the packet, we wouldn't have one of these check-ins until a year from now. Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. I just wanted to be sure I was on track. And then just, I think this all sounds like a good approach as well. And then just my comment is I think that, what we all know is there will be a need to shift, and predictable things will happen. Hopefully, knock on wood, not as unpredictable as this past year. But so I really like this approach of kind of setting our expectations, like, let's check in, see how this is going, what we need to adjust, what we've done, I appreciate that path forward. Thanks.
Perfect. Great. Yeah. What's that expression of the only constant is change? And so being able to be nimble and be able to react to those opportunities and changing environments will be really important. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to present on that schedule and getting your feedback on it. The next topic we have is on water and sewer fees. And if we could bring in Marie, I see her coming in now. She'll be able to speak to this one. And there were 2 attachments to this agenda item.
Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to present some ideas I had for cost recovery, but before I went further on them, I wanted to provide and request some direction. What I have done is made a hypothetical project, and I have looked up other utility fees that would be charged for the same type of hypothetical project by some of our neighboring utilities to demonstrate that maybe it's time for us to look at some more cost recovery options through fees. And then the second attachment you have is a table of things that really don't directly benefit our customer base as a whole, but that take a lot of staff time to address. And I've color coded them as only recommendations, sorry, for discussion on them. So the orange peachy color are things that I think we could address and should address. And then they're ranked in lesser priority going down. So really tonight I'm just seeking discussion and direction from the board on whether I should pursue really nailing down and proposing a certain fee for a task that we do for development purposes. And if I see Commissioner Ferguson.
Yes, well, particularly since developers don't have to pay taxes while they hold undeveloped land and God knows what else. I think it makes fiscal sense. You know, our time is not free. The time we spend on these activities is time that we're not spent elsewhere. And while, I mean, these are necessary services, and they certainly, bring value to, the overall development process and where we're going. But it doesn't change the fact that time is money, and the time we have has value, and it's fair to charge and recover some of those. So those are my thoughts.
I see Commissioner Hughes.
I would agree on that. And I'm sorry if my dogs come charging through here in a moment. I think that everything that's in that peachy color, I would say definitely, I would say reading all your comments and notes and the description of it should in fact have a fee attached to it. I would say that while the blues don't always look like they take much time, I'm looking at easement and encroachment preparation. I do see Bob's name there. That means we're paying Bob for his time. And so while that might be a lesser, maybe something that's done less often or doesn't require as much time, if we are, paying Bob on an hourly basis to do some of this work, then I definitely think that should be really kind of taken into account. Things in the gray, like invoicing or signing off on various things. I think that would be, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head that it's something that would be of lesser interest. I would say that maybe in that gray though would be the annexation review, and I would just say that might also at some point require some sort of legal review as well. But other than that, I think I would suggest moving forward with the peachy and the blue, and maybe look at that annexation review.
Commissioner Bell.
I absolutely concur that we're leaving a lot on the table in terms of essentially subsidizing the development of parcels like this. I'm just kind of shocked at how little we're charging in comparison to others, and how much of the work that we're being asked to do is essentially being given away. So I'm all for revising what that looks like. I'm open to suggestions on how much and in which categories, but overall, yeah, we're really leaving a lot on the table there.
Thank you. Commissioner English.
I just chime in on where Commissioner Bell and Commissioner Hughes kind of left off. I'm in agreement also that we need to find some way to capture the costs of what we're providing. So I think a change in the current fees, as you've outlined, is warranted. So it's certainly something that I would be for.
Great. Mayor?
Second, all of my colleagues' comments so far in complete agreement. And I especially, reflecting on our last meeting and the conversation we had there with some of the challenges with Collins Ridge. In particular, just thinking about that phenomenon and how challenging that could be. It's probably happened before. It'll probably happen again. And the difference it makes, I don't know if this even makes sense. So I trust you, Marie, to bring something back to us that, is workable and makes sense. But I was wondering on that particular item, the blue one, about when they're ready, trying to get their COs ready. And then, our staff has to drop everything to make that happen. When there's, so many other things we might need to be doing, is that there's a way to incentivize, a timely process that then if it starts to become some sort of emergency, then there's a fee for that. I don't know if that is workable, like I said, but that thought ran through when I was looking through these. But thanks for everything everyone said before me.
Anybody else?
Well, as far as what everybody said, I'm totally, I think it's a good thing. And I think you're very smart to bring that forward now. Because we got all these houses coming.
Thank you so much. I will figure out the best way to present something that is justifiable and fair. And I've already started looking at how other utilities develop their fees, and there's a few ways that it could be approached.
That's good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marie. All right, well, if there's nothing else on that, we can go on to the next topic.
She didn't just freeze for me, right?
She froze and disappeared.
Maybe that's my cue. When somebody
Yes.
freezes and disappears, I
I'll get it
jump
back.
in and say something. So I'm going to just kind of go over a few key points and then toss it over to Margaret, and she'll talk about her half of the restructure proposal, and then back to me on the admin side. Number one, we've all heard the term just-in-time delivery. Well, this is a good example of, like, I wasn't in time. I was about 2 weeks behind schedule. I know I mentioned it, but I want to let everybody know this is still a work in progress, depending on the feedback we get from the board. And a lot of our staff have not had enough time to be able to go through and really work out the details. So it's sort of like roughed some things out. So I think that probably in a month from now, you'll see a more refined version going forward. But anyway, I tried as hard as I could, but I just ran out of time. And quick process wise, we went through a round of feedback from everybody back in the fall when we started to have all these vacancies, and then did another round maybe 2 months ago. And then just Margaret and I have had a lot of conversations probably for over a year about this. So I did the best I could starting off to try to synthesize everything, even though there was a lot of different perspectives that folks shared. I don't think I mentioned in the summary that, like, one of the key parameters that I had of trying to put something together was have the initial model have no additional FTEs and be basically about the same cost. So basically being cost neutral. We can refine it and come back with other options, but it's a lot easier to expand than it is to chop something back. And tonight, when we're getting feedback from the board on these concepts, I find myself all the time, whoever you're talking to on whatever it is budget about replacing equipment or people, it's like, yeah, we've got to do that. So tonight we're going to be focused on this, but the board, you're going to be looking at the bigger picture in a few weeks. So, everything competes against each other. Other things we want to do with the organization personnel wise, that competes against, equipment, facility, climate change, all this other stuff. So, but tonight we're just trying to bear down on this one. I think really that's probably everything for right now. And there's a lot of driving reasons for bringing this before the board, so I won't rehash all of them as you already read them. You already know about them, but probably the biggest driver, as I said, is when Margaret walks out the door in about 2 years, she could probably give us the exact day, 1 year, 10 months, 13 days, or something like that, that there will be more knowledge walking out the door when Margaret goes than with probably any other town employee we've had. And we've had some really good ones go. And just so the board knows, I've given Margaret an open invitation that if she wants to stay longer, she is welcome to do that. And actually part of the reorg makes it easier, by the way we've done things if she wants to stay longer, but she's been pretty clear about how she feels right now. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to Margaret right now.
Thanks, Eric. And thanks for the board for giving us an opportunity to kind of lay this out. Having gone through a number of department head changes this year, some with more lead time than others, I felt it was really important, since I have a really good idea of when I intend to retire, to get everybody, it's the day after my 55th birthday, in case anybody wants to know, to get folks talking about it, because when I started here with the town, I didn't have a mentor. I learned it all on my own. There wasn't anybody here to back me up. So anything that you see that's happened over 30 years, just go ahead and blame it on that. I'll take that. But I don't want to leave the next person in that position. And the only way to learn it is to experience it, in my opinion. You've got to have that person come to you and ask the off-the-wall question when there's nobody else around, and you've got to go try and figure out how to answer that question. I think in the memo and things that are in the agenda packet, Eric did a really good job of kind of laying out some of the basics that maybe we forget about, that not everybody has to be a department director. Just because what a person is responsible for is really important doesn't necessarily mean they have to be a department director that reports to the manager. And I was talking with someone last week and said, yeah, this is basically my first job out of grad school, and I've had 4 different bosses and reported to a number of different people. So I've gone from being a part-time planning assistant to interim planning director to planning director, assistant town manager, and hopefully to assistant town manager, and had a handful of different supervisors. And every time you do that, it really is a different job. So I've had 4 or 5 different jobs without ever leaving the town of Hillsborough, and I greatly appreciated that. And so, Eric and I have been talking back and forth about a variety of these issues and trying to provide both him some relief and an opportunity for someone to live by doing the planning aspect of what I do, the land use regulation aspect. This provides an opportunity here to do that, and to take a number of divisions that are all very, very important, and provide critical services and greatly contribute to the quality of life to our residents, and have them all report to one person who, at least on some level, understands a lot of what they do, not everything, still learning public works. But there's a lot of commonality amongst these various divisions, and having them all report to one person helps with communication. It helps with finding opportunities to work together, helps make sure that we don't get in each other's way. And it's really, really valuable, I think, to the organization and to the community. And this provides some fantastic opportunities for folks to try new things, build some capacity, and contribute more to the organization, and help retain some of our really star employees, so that they don't start looking for jobs elsewhere. This all really hinges, though, on unfreezing the planning technician position. That position's been frozen for like 1.5 years. And that is that entry level position that is so critical right now when we're issuing sometimes 10 to 15 permits a day, which is just unheard of. That's just for new houses. Collins Ridge likes to dump them in glumps. Now that we've made it a little bit easier for them to submit things electronically and make some of the payments online, it is nothing to come in the morning and have 15 payments all sitting there from the online credit card. And those all have to be processed. But we are at this weird place where, you know, Collins Ridge is becoming the only game in town. We are rapidly, they are just about the only neighborhood that has much of any housing stock left. And so it's going to be strange here in very short order of time in terms of development activity. I can tell you that the inquiries for, and this ties right on to what Maria was just talking about, the inquiries for people wanting services at odd little lots that we never thought were going to be able to develop. Every day, somebody's like, what can I do on this lot that is in the city limits, but you can't possibly get water and sewer to? And to respond to those in a full way takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources. But replacing this planning tech position will put a little bit of slack in the planning department's workload so that one, the two folks who have had the least experience in some of these bigger processes get a chance to do those things, or at least less experience in Hillsborough doing those things, and allows the other two of us who've been here longer to serve more as resources and focus on bigger picture issues and staying on top of some of these bigger development projects. I think we're also seeing an increase in the number of non-residential sites, and non-residential sites require a lot more supervision. No matter how many times you tell an applicant at their pre-construction meeting that if they make any change, they need to talk to us first, they never do. It's always, you're gonna have another waiver request at the next public hearing, because folks just will not stop and call us first for things that they find in the field that need to be adjusted. And it's unfortunate, and we haven't seemed to find a way around it. But so the reorg kind of, you know, creating that slack, coordinating these different operations together, and moving forward and allow me to take a more of a backseat resource, I'm here if you need me kind of role, will allow the other planning staff to really learn a lot. And the best way to learn is really by doing. And so I tested that out at the end of February. I sent out an email to like my regular contacts and said, yeah, don't call me anymore. Don't email me. Please reach out to Justin for these types of things and to Shannon for these types of things, and know that we've got their back. If they have questions, they'll come to Tom or myself. It's no problem, but please go to them first and give them 2 days to respond. And it's gone very well. Nobody revolted and called up and said, what are you doing? You know, had a couple of people wish me an early retirement, but that's gone well. And I think it has opened the eyes of Shannon and Justin into all the work that goes on, but it also has helped them know a lot more of what's going on, and that they are both very competent to take on these additional roles and move forward. So I put in the packet about, you know, affordable housing and transportation planning are planning adjacent. Certainly plenty of folks I went to planning school with have gotten specialized in those areas. All of our neighbors have 2 or more staff tied to those responsibilities outside their planning department. I am not advocating for hiring a staff person for affordable housing or a staff person for transportation planning. But for the short term, I'll hold on to those and wait and see where the best place for those to land in the organization in the future is, as the town continues to morph and grow and figure out what the priority of those issues are. And then, you know, code enforcement, we always struggle with code enforcement because folks who are really good code enforcement officers aren't always really good first points of contact or really good liaison type folks. It's a different sort of mindset. And there just isn't quite enough work here to keep a code enforcement officer busy, which is good. We wouldn't want there to be enough work to keep a code enforcement officer busy. But it does mean that folks have to actually complain, pick up the phone, send us an email to get us to respond to things. And that can be dissatisfying to the public. I realize that, but it's the one way that we can manage that without worrying about complaints of being unfair. The folks who live between my house and town hall get the planning director to drive by twice a day. And is that really fair that I see what they're doing on a regular basis versus anybody else? And so I have long held the belief that we needed to wait for complaints. And another thing that is absolutely critical to all of this working is finding the resources for the facility coordinator position. A lot of department heads are spending time managing our buildings. We've agreed to allow more access of the Fairview Station to the neighborhood, and that's going to take time and support necessity. And public space is growing, and the importance of our public spaces is huge. And by adding sustainability to that role, there just needs to be some support there as well. So I'm glad that we were able to do this in a way that actually is not a net increase of folks. But my opinion is that this is a pretty good plan, but I would love some feedback to hear if there's things that we haven't addressed from the board's perspective, or maybe there's some more comments or questions about, so that we can flesh them out and look at them in more detail before that you look at this again. And I know Eric wants to take on the admin side of the house, so I can stop for questions, or I can. Commissioner Ferguson?
First of all, thank you. This is a heck of a lot of work. The only real question I have is, in looking at the org chart, what immediately struck me was actually your knowledge will continue to grow more, which makes it even harder to replace you. That was my first impression. So can you talk a little bit more about how this helps succession planning? Because when I look at it, it looks like it would be more difficult.
Well, what we're doing is, since the bulk of my knowledge is land use planning and the development history and all of that we are setting up other folks to learn that during the time. And I'll be back up to help them know where to find in probably my less than clear filing system where things are. But beyond that, kind of the next step, what I see as my projects is to try and create some data sets and stuff that I feel like we should have had based on generally available public data before. And it's really just management of people and processes. So
Okay.
it's less Hillsborough specific. It's more of a generalist position. So back many years ago, when Demetric Potts came in as the assistant town manager, he was assistant town manager / public works director, and wasn't really he hadn't come up through public works by any stretch of the imagination. And at that point, it becomes a little bit easier to hire somebody who's managing people and processes.
Okay.
And then from my perspective, then it's more of a generalist. And then I think it will actually be easier to hire an assistant town manager than it would have been to try and hire the assistant town manager, planning director. That would have, I told Eric a while ago that was going to be 2 people. So this just spreads out the hiring of those 2 people over time.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Commissioner Bell?
Kind of a general question in that it seems like there's a whole lot of calculus that goes into figuring out which positions to consolidate, to move around, change the reporting structure. But at the end of the day, do we have the number of people we need to actually get the job done? I was thinking about this before tonight's meeting and before we received the agenda. And so it's something that's been on my mind, that we seem to have, we're in a really busy period in the life of the town. And the amount of work that the staff are doing just keeps growing and growing and growing. And this is not a perfect analogy, but I was just wondering, are we rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic rather than buying a bunch of lifeboats? I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, after this complicated exercise and tremendous organizational change that will result, that we actually have the overall capacity to do what we need to do.
That's a great question. And honestly, in a perfect world, I would say no, we don't have the resources we need. We probably need a number of positions, but we can't afford them and do the other things that the board says that they want us to do. So this is an alternative that we can bring to you that leverages the situation that we're in. And I'll just say one more thing and then I'll be quiet. Yes, we are in a high growth period right now, but the end is in sight. We are rapidly approaching a build out situation, whether you look at it from how much land is in our jurisdiction or our utility capacity. And hiring people now sets us up for having to let people go in fairly short order. And while I've never had to do that, I know Eric has, and it's not a fun thing to talk about. And so it may be, while we're all gonna do the duck option of being very peaceful on the surface and paddling like crazy underneath for a while longer, it's probably in the best interest of the organization, because I don't think we can truly afford to do everything the board wants to do and staff up to where we ought to be. And that's my 2 cents. I can't be any clearer than that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ferguson?
But along those lines, I mean, and I know, and when I say this, I am cognizant that we have, I mean, we're budgetary constraints and that sort of thing. But is it a case of where, contractors is something along those lines, where we're not bringing on people full time, but we are bringing in adjunct staff as contractors for shorter term periods? Could that be an option that would make fiscal sense?
We could certainly look at that. My experience with contractors is that they're hard to find because folks don't want that short-term commitment. And then you have either they're unplugged from the organization and it takes a little bit more effort to manage them, or they're really not very good.
Okay.
And I'll just be honest, I was not in favor of contracting out fire inspections. I thought it was really important to keep that in-house. I'm jumping on the bandwagon and going with it because at the end of the day, when you add up the money, it just makes sense from a financial standpoint. I don't like to give up control. Those who know me, I'm kind of a control freak. I like to have say over what goes on here, and I draw the boundaries very hard at the city limits and the planning jurisdiction. I don't need to know what goes on outside of those areas. I'm sure that's a downfall, but yeah, contractors right now, some of the hardest positions to hire would be some of these specialties outside of the construction field, which is actually impossible to hire right now. Building inspectors, fire inspectors, surveyors are some of the hardest jobs to hire. Not that we need a surveyor on staff, that's not what I'm saying, but There's one reason why it's kind of good to offload the building inspections is that's a very hard position to hire. A code enforcement officer would be very hard to hire right now. And my experience with contract planners has not really been very positive.
Again, thank you for that.
Commissioner Hughes and then Commissioner English.
I think a lot of what y'all laid out in your organizational structure and everything really makes sense. And I hear Commissioner Ferguson's concern about, would we be losing more institutional knowledge when you do get ready to retire? But I look at it a little differently, which is it gets a fresh set of eyes on a lot of our different departments and operations that, frankly, Eric doesn't have the time to really devote. And it's like any of us who's written something and there's a mistake that's been there every time you've revised something and you keep missing it because you're just so familiar with what the intention was or what the rationale was that you just completely miss these small things and getting a different viewpoint. So I think that's really good. And without hiring more staff, I really don't know how else we lessen the load on Eric. 13 direct reports to me is, I get sad just thinking about the performance reviews of having to do 13 performance reviews every year. And so that also means to me that there are staff that's not getting as regular feedback, as regular attention, critical one-on-one time with critical town employees, and being able to split that up. I'm wearing my HR hat. Being able to split that up, I think really makes a lot of sense. I really don't have much else to weigh in on other than just a small concern, and the small concern is about economic development, because it was mentioned in the section about the reclassification and how much time that person would need to focus on tourism. And I think that it will be important to ensure that, since both the TDA and the tourism board contributes to that salary, that salary is adjusted to take into account how much FTE is provided for by those two entities versus the rest of the town's general fund. That's the only thing that really came to mind as I was reading it.
And that might be exactly one of those circumstances where a contract position works better in terms of taking those contributions from the tourism board and TDA might be enough to hire a part-time person who then supports other activities. Not that we're proposing that at this time. It's just, we have to think through it. And like Eric said, this is still kind of, well, I won't call it the first draft. It's probably like the fourth draft, but it probably needs to be about the 10th draft before we commit to it.
I don't know who drafted it, but if it was Eric, there was 20 drafts before anyone else saw it. So that's for sure.
Yeah, Eric did the bulk of it. I only had small sections. Commissioner English, I think you had questions.
I do, just a few. So first of all, I like the plan, and I'm very conscious about how that we got to take care of our people. A couple of questions that I had were, so these folks that were reclassifying for like supervisor to manager, is there any change in salary for that at this time, or they're just taking on additional responsibilities or new responsibilities, but at the same level of pay?
I saw Eric unmute, so I guess he's going to take that one on.
Sure.
That's good.
So, good question. So what the process would be, I think with everybody that whose position is in green, is that whatever the approval is in the budget process of the board, if you approve the budget with this in it, then those positions are then authorized. Then the next step we would go through would be each one of those staff members would fill out, we've got a detailed job description questionnaire. It's very detailed. That would get all completed then that would go to Haley, and then they've got a tool that allows them to, basically recalculate like what's the new salary range compared to the market, where does this person fall in the range. So there's sort of two steps: new job description, new salary grade, which the town board will have to approve, and then we have to identify where the people go in those within that pay range. So the short answer is yes, additional responsibility, additional pay. And so that's, I don't know where that will come out, but I could not give you a spreadsheet to tell you on the cost exactly like person A is going to go from here to here and it's going to be exactly this much, but we sort of ballparked it, feeling things are going to be relatively expense neutral at this point.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I'm for, I think, your proposed changes. And again, no, it's I look at it as an opportunity for these additional staff people to soak up Margaret's and all senior management people's knowledge and experience, and hopefully, they will all be here a year and a half from now or whenever Margaret retires, and they'll have that much additional institutional knowledge and can help continue to spread that. So good work.
Commissioner Hughes and then Mayor Jen. I've got to say, I love Marie starting this concept of the staff person who's presenting gets to call on people, and then Jen started too. So I really kind of like that.
And y'all are subject matter experts, especially in a workshop. I do have one question, and that's just looking at the structure of the. Let me scroll down there. The structure of, I guess, what would be the. I don't think we'd call it administrative services department, I guess, but I'm trying to not think about it about people who are in current roles, but instead just more generally. But it's inevitable to think about people in current roles because the person in that role will oversee HR, and I think more HR than presently or previously envisioned. To me, HR is one of those things that really requires a lot of physical proximity to, the human capital of an organization. So I assume that that's been thought through and taken into consideration, and really getting a feel for what that person might have to do, in those, I don't want to just say the sticky situations that are, those that carry a lot of baggage, but, just more generally being, present for folks when they need that additional HR support.
Yes, I can't remember if you asked, had it been thought through? That there's probably, I'm not sure it's been thought. You can always think things through more, but from having conversations as far as, and basically just rewinding what was in the proposal, when Jen started 7 years ago, she was working for HR, PIO, and budget, and so it's fairly fluent in those areas. But I also want to, while it's on my mind, just really say what an amazing job Haley and Sarah have done since Kathy's departure goes, because one of the things that's happened is like that workload didn't go away. Haley and Sarah are doing their jobs plus what Catherine was doing, and we've just had a flood of all sorts of activities going on. But as far as, so I wanted to make sure to recognize them. With Jen working remotely, one of the things that the admin director is not going to be usually the first point of contact, but she's going to be in town once we get out of COVID on a regular basis, monthly, if not more often. So if there need to be meetings or face-to-face or running the Citizens Academy or whatever, she's already indicated, she'll be here. And one thing that's been educational during the last year is just how much easier. We don't all love Zoom, and we probably get headaches from it sometimes, but I had just read somewhere else where in some companies that are really large, where they're spread out everywhere, that a lot of people actually feel more connected because they just used to be on the phone and via email. And ideally, it'd be great if we were all here. And so, I mean, that is a a factor to consider as far as having somebody run these operations that are remote. So I think that I'm open to options, and suggestions on how we can mitigate that. But also the trade-off is if we've got somebody in-house that already has relationships with everybody else and they work together all the time now, if I don't do that, then I have to go outside and hire someone else, and it's probably going to be more expensive and more risk than not work. So that was sort of like weighing that out. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's correct, and I'm sure there's plenty of gaps, but those are my quick thoughts. Commissioner Ferguson?
Yeah, well, as someone who's in an industry where, the Zoom world is way of doing business for a couple of decades or more, I have no qualms about remote. In fact, in some ways, I think it's more effective, and you can get, you are closer in a lot of ways. But my actual question is that, and I didn't know if we were going into the admin side yet, but my question was, it seemed to be odd to me to have fleet under administration as opposed to with public works. I mentally, it seems to be that it's an odd fish. So why would fleet be kind of on its own and away from the departments that it's serving closer? Or am I missing something? So help me. Help me be in the right place.
Right. No, great question. In two quick comments. One, David Wisely and the fleet staff are phenomenal, and David's he's always on cruise control. He's just got things, and he's been, as far as like all the people that I supervise, everybody's low maintenance, but he's incredibly low maintenance. But when he needs me, he gets up with me. And that, even though it's a small operation, fleet affects everybody in the operation. And that was actually really talked about a whole lot. And David was great and said, hey, I'm happy to go wherever it makes sense. And I think, as was mentioned in the memo, there was one like, oh, well, it should it go under sustainability because of vehicles. And I explained why that's not that pressing right now. And if fleet was just under public works, that's just one of many stakeholders because everybody uses fleet. And I can't remember who mentioned the analogy, but it was like fleet is sort of like IT, or they're like HR, and they're sort of covering everybody. So that's overarching. Fleet has a lot of interaction with budget. I think over the years, Emily and David have worked together a lot on vehicle replacements. And then the other main reason is that fleet and safety, which is David Wisely and Tiny Moore, they are in the same building. They interact a lot. If there's accidents, there's safety issues regarding vehicles, whether it's like, hey, we want to prevent an accident, or there was just an accident, dealing with the insurance company, dealing with HR. That's actually by far the most amount of interaction going on in that group. But there's good arguments to have put it in other places. So that was actually a really good question. I don't know if I answered it well or not.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's definitely an integral. It's just, anyhow, no, I thank you. I appreciate that. And I did have a follow-on question, because with the town, with the town clerk role being that mandated role, it just seems odd to have it further down in the org chart in terms of, I don't know, is that normal in other organizations to have the clerkship further down in the org as opposed to also serving as that administrative head and having HR underneath, just because it's that mandated role?
So another good question, and I'll make a couple quick points, but before I forget, I believe the folks that fall under the admin umbrella they're going to get together and have some discussions. and I'm sure I'll miss some of the things that may or may not have been mentioned in the memo, as far as like, this is one of these small organization types of things. Like, everybody has a slash on their name. You know, even if they don't have an official slash, there's lots of unofficial slashes. I think in most small organizations, the town clerk is like Catherine Cathy. She was the HR director and the clerk, and before Donna Armbrister, you know, took on duties. And if you look at that, I think it's unusual in our size that somebody only does clerk. That doesn't completely answer the question about where do they go in the reporting structure. So talking currently about like the duties that Sarah's doing, of course, she's taken on a lot more, she's taken on all the clerk duties actually, plus she's still been an integral part of HR, you know, and due to her background also being in finance. So she's dealing with HR, working with Haley. There's a lot of backup between Sarah, Haley, and Tiny. If one of them's gone, they can cover for each other. So that's one dynamic. Another dynamic, which goes to more like possibilities that this could evolve or change, is that there's a lot of interaction between the clerk, for the reasons Commissioner Ferguson mentioned, public interaction in our public information office. So Catherine Wright had mentioned, well, maybe we need to change, instead of being the public information office, to being the communications office. So there's the PIO office is also doing most of the minutes. So we've got a lot of overlap there. So that's something we can continue to look at. Now, tying into a question Commissioner Bell asked Margaret about, does this give you enough people? So this is my first best stab on the admin side. People have already raised questions and had ideas that I think will make this better. I know I mentioned that one of my biggest concerns is like adding the management analyst to help HR, budget, PIO, and try to work the peaks. I don't know that HR and budget may have the same peaks. If they do, workload wise, then that's not going to work. But my intent was, let's try it. Let's see if we can bring in longer term interns. But I was like reading some GARE information over the past week. And I know Haley mentioned to me that one of the proposals or recommendations from GARE is that ideally an organization should have a full-time equity and inclusion officer. Now, I don't know if they're thinking like a city the size of Durham or Hillsborough. We're smaller. So to me, in my mind, that goes to another slash situation. Certainly we could keep somebody busy more than 40 hours a week. And I can just tell you how busy Haley and Sarah have been on the HR stuff lately. So ideally, I would feel much more comfortable and sleep better at night, and so would the staff, if we were able to add an HR analyst position, assign equity and inclusion officer duties more specifically to one of those positions. But then that leaves budget in a total lurch. And they've got less staff than they did because we let Jamie go last year. And we think the budget software is going to help, but we're still having the budget staff working 7 days a week and sending. Last week, I got an email at 2 a.m. from Jen, not to be outdone by Emily, at like 2:11 or 2:12 a.m. And it's just like everybody's working a whole lot. So if we decide going further in the budget that we want to make even a bigger impact on our equity and inclusion efforts, then we're going to have to do something on the budget side. So anyways, that was a really long-winded answer. So if we ended up doing something like that, maybe that frees up more time for Sarah or the clerk to be in a different position organization-wise. But anyway, I'll stop talking. Mayor Jen. Oh,
All right. I had a handful of things, and one of them, Eric, was what you just brought up, was about the equity inclusion piece, and just thinking about how that fits in. And I'm probably not going to say this very clearly, but just how important that work is to the organization. And I think we all understand the reasons. That's the climate that we're in. And it's just really important for us to be the organization we want to be. And it's a lot and everyone's also learning at the same time. So that was just sort of I'm just glad you mentioned it and that you're thinking about it, because it's hard to learn and do at the same time. And I appreciate everyone's efforts at doing that in the staff right now, and just that you're thinking about how that might play in one of those flashes in the future. Just generally speaking, again, understanding this is a draft, it's still a good looking draft. I think that getting that number of direct reports to the town manager lowered seems absolutely of paramount importance. So that in and of itself would be, that makes it good just doing that. I think that feels really important given what all the things that are going on and have been going on. And also having this plan after y'all gave us that list back in March of everyone's responsibilities of all the positions, having that list in the background while looking at this reorg chart just made it come to life that much more. So thanks again for doing that and the work that went into making that list. So back to what the things that Margaret was saying, I know we're not to the actual budget part yet, but when we get there, it does seem like, that facilities manager and the planning tech, we have been talking about those positions for several years and just putting them off. And it doesn't seem like we can put them off anymore. So I hope that we do figure out a way to finally make that happen. And then just one note, Margaret, in that list that you had, the different kind of aspects of your position, and there was a paragraph about affordable housing and transportation. I think it makes total sense, the way you've explained what those pieces are like, and that you continue to hold those for now. I would comment that that even though we as a town are not likely to have a lot of money to make transformative transportation things happen, where our role in that funding pool is always going to be small. But I do think that is going to change. I do think that from the state level, the people who create the container for transportation funding, I do think there's going to be some changes there. Whether it's in 2, 5, or 10 years, I don't know, but it just isn't. I just don't see it as sustainable the way that they're doing it, given the fact that transportation that sector is the biggest emitter of emissions in the state, and something is going to have to be done. It's just one of those of when people want to or not. So that was a long way of saying that sector is so closely tied to sustainability that as you think about how to hand that off in the future, I would just ask that you be thinking about how that ties in, and that both having the long view for that is so important, as you know really well, and understanding the process is so important. And so just before you leave, just be sure somebody understands the process, because I've been on the NPO for 4 years, and it's still a lot to keep organized in my head. So those are my only comments. Great job. I think it's a good move.
Yeah, on that one, I think the town's representative could actually be the assistant town manager in the long run, because even the staff level meetings are much more about policy and budget than they are about transportation engineering. And so once you understand, learning that framework and understanding and seeing where the opportunities are and so on and so forth, like you talked about with the funding and the steps, while it is unusual to put such a high level person in those meetings, it might be more effective for the town of Hillsborough than asking a planner who also has 12 other things to do to get into that alphabet soup of organization and funding streams and all of that. It is a lot to tease out, and it's just been something I've been thinking about. But thank you for raising it, because you're absolutely right.
I don't think I had anything else. It just sort of like naturally the board questions covered everything that I was going to mention on the admin side. Most important thing was just being able to get feedback or questions or ideas from the board.
All right. Jen, do you have anything else?
No, that's all. We got through all our topics for the mini retreat. Thanks for all the feedback.
All right, great. Well, thanks for all the effort that went into all the pieces of that section we just went through. It's a lot to think about, but it sounds good. It will be good. Moving on to item number 4B that we added in our amended agenda. Matt wanted to bring up the possibility of purchasing and hanging flags for Pride Month. Matt, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. And this was something that came to mind, and I hated that I ended up sending Eric an email on Friday. I think also maybe even a text message just asking, if I could get it on, if it would be too late to talk about this. But we declared Pride Month for the first time in 2019. It was the year after I came onto the board, so 2019. And at the time, Mayor Weaver and I said, oh, wouldn't it be so great to, put up pride flags next year? And so with the pandemic and everything else, I think we both forgot about it. But I think that would be another, very visible sign for folks regarding the inclusivity of Hillsborough. Eric did send me some helpful questions, which I responded to. Mainly, Pride Month is sandwiched in between two patriotic holidays, one being Memorial Day and the other one being July 4th. Being very cognizant of not just the purchase of the flags, which I think he's costed out, and I don't have that email just yet pulled up. But, I think being cognizant of staff taking time to put flags up, take them down, put them up, take them down, that would make sense to, as Memorial Day is the last day of the month this year. And then also Pride Month then subsequently starts the very next day. That I think would make a lot of sense to place the flags where we normally would place flags and intersperse them. I think we do American and North Carolina flags, and just have that every third flag be a pride flag. I think would be fine, save staff time, rather than go up the polls 3 times in 2 months. But I think this would be good. I don't know how many we would need. I think maybe 30 or so is what we probably would need. Those with taxes and polls and everything comes out to $1,600, give or take. And we should be able to source them from Carrot Top, which of course is a local vendor. I can't remember if they're officially in town, but definitely a local business.
I'll apologize because I was not in the office today, so I didn't see all those email exchanges. But one thing, last year we adopted the Juneteenth holiday, and it had occurred to me that you've got Memorial Day, Flag Day, Juneteenth, all extremely, and Father's Day, all extremely close together. We usually put the flags up for all of those. I had initially thought that perhaps we could put the flags up for one and take them down at the last one and just leave them up for longer. I did happen to see Dustin's email about concern about them being up a long time. I was just thinking of how many times they would get the bucket truck out and disrupt traffic putting them up and down. But the idea of having all 3 flags up at the same time might be another way to address that, and have, especially since June overlaps all of those holidays. Maybe there's a way that we can have the flags up for a little bit longer and not have so many ups and downs and be a little bit more efficient with staff time. It's just something to throw out there for feedback.
Questions and comments on this proposal? Rob?
I'm in support of the proposal. I think it's something that that we're proud of, and I'm proud of, and would like to display in a more meaningful way. Going back to Justin's thing with the flag thing, Margaret, is it having them out too long, just the wear and tear on them that would occur over time?
He indicated the wear and tear, but they also get tangled. We do still have heavy trucks coming downtown, and they do get tangled in things. So we'd have to weigh that off, and maybe rather than them all staying up longer, maybe we swap them out so that it's still only one bucket truck visit, where you take one down and put something else up, rather than take something down, wait 3 days, come back and put something else up, take it down, wait 3 days, take something else. But I'm more than happy to talk to Dustin about it and try and figure out what is the more efficient way to do it, if that's something the board wants to do.
And would it be fair to say that the board would be okay with whatever, Dustin and, whatever he comes up with that seems the simplest that will get the job done? Does that seem okay? Thumbs up. Is that okay? All right. Cool. Yes, Eric.
Just to make it simple, if the board could just pass, just pass a motion in a second, and then that'll give us coverage, because we may need a small budget amendment that you might see in a couple of weeks. But just if you can pass a motion in a second, just authorizing that, the expense, and directing staff to make that happen, that'd be great.
I'm
All right,
glad to
Matt.
move that we authorize the expense and give staff the flexibility to implement as they see as pragmatic.
All right.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. And we roll call the vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Matt, for bringing that before us. It feels a little bit overdue. So thank you for getting that on your radar and bringing that to us in the nick of time.
The things you think of when you have insomnia.
Indeed. Okay, item number 5, other business. Any other business? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll go to item number 6, committee updates and reports. Evelyn, any updates?
Well, Mr. Griffin, the elder, suggested that we follow barrels, but the thing is, nobody could find the barrels. So he wanted to have the meeting on the third Thursday, which would, I think it's the third Thursday, Margaret can tell me, that would fall on the night of the board of the town board and the planning board. And so I said, well, so you don't want me on the board anymore. Well, no, that's not it. I don't like changing around. And so I wrote an email to Eric and also to Margaret, and then also to the fire chief, that we would have, that all of us, one of the board members would have to attend, and we all should be in the joint meeting. So I don't know whether, so Jeff, the chief tried to find by his bylaws, and he said he couldn't find them. So we'll go back and argue about that, but there are a lot of things spent that aren't necessary that Mr. Griffin thinks are. I guess he likes to plan his schedule. And they talked about things in general. I think things are going along well with the chief. I don't have any problems with him. It's just Mr. Griffin. But it's an interesting board.
Thank you,
And
Evelyn.
after 15 years, I think I know more, a little bit more than Mr. Griffin, but we won't tell him.
That'll be our secret here in this public meeting. Thank you, Evelyn. And I hope
But
that.
I didn't say which Mr. Griffin. so-
Oh, no. I hope that meeting time gets worked out in a workable fashion. Kathleen.
Well, we had City Vision. The sessions were excellent. If you missed it, you really missed some very informative sessions. So I still encourage folks to be involved with the league. It's a great place to connect with others. And again, you know, the webinars, the seminars, they are informative, and the advocacy on behalf of municipalities with the legislature. The league is respected, the legislature listens, and while I think most folks on this meeting already know, the league is open to any staff member in the municipality, and as well as the elected. So, excuse me, the other piece is the affiliated groups are also active, and I was named vice chair for the Women in Municipal Government for the coming 2 years. On the COG side, you know, budget season there too. So we're starting to look ahead and planning the bit of the summit, but you've seen a lot that's coming out on housing, a lot on the transportation. During City Vision, there was a really good piece on water and smart growth. And again, those subcommittees are it's not just for the delegate. While I sit on the board, the other subcommittees are open, and I encourage folks to be involved. It's a good way to be, you know, our voice on the regional issues. Again, the legislature is looking at the COGS, and you know, water is one of those areas where the legislature, while right now we don't have the interbasin transfers or the consolidation, that's on the horizon. And it's just a way for our voice to be get a seat at the table, in other words. And I'm sure there was something else, but my mind is, I don't remember off the top of my head. Those were the majors.
Thank you, Kathleen, and congratulations on your appointment.
Oh, I take that back. There was one other bit. Sorry, the Reentry Council. It is Reentry Month, so there's still more activities to support reentry, and that's the various and sundry providers who are all providing, you know, those who are coming out of incarceration, as well as working with those to prevent them from going into incarceration. So with that, I promise I'm done.
Thank you. And Rob.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. So Orange County Climate Council, there's a committee that's working on bylaws for that group. So this group got started without really a foundation of having some formal kind of bylaws in place, and but they're working on that now in terms of just kind of having a little bit more structure to the organization and the group. Talking about term limits and how to reappoint somebody if it becomes vacant. So looking forward to some more structure coming out by having some bylaws that everybody agrees to kind of moving forward. There's also among staff, when I say staff, we're talking about Hillsborough, Stephanie, the sustainability staff, Chapel Hill sustainability staff, Orange County, are all talking about some joint projects that potentially, we can all kind of benefit from moving forward, and what those may be. So next month they are presenting some ideas potentially that Orange County Climate Council can discuss and endorse, and see how we can kind of move forward with some hopefully joint projects moving forward. We're still working on outreach for that with some vacancies. We were able to fill a school vacancy from Orange County Schools, so that was good. But there are still some additional, mostly at-large sort of vacancies that are out there in that group. There's also talk about changing the meeting time. The current meeting time is not really conducive for high school age students. And one of the things that we talked about is getting more kind of youth involved with that. And so there's some talk about changing that time to a little bit later in the day. So high schoolers would be able to participate after normal high school hours, or potentially changing in the evening. So we'll see. It's tricky, as you all know, to come up with a time that works for everybody, but trying to find a time that works for more student involvement or more high school age kids to be involved with that. We had Intergovernmental Parks Work Group meeting last week's first one in a while, almost maybe a year. And that was another great meeting, lots of new faces. Meeting really was about introducing all the new faces to people that either haven't met them before or haven't been in the meeting as a member before. So we went on the room and talked about who we are and what we do. So again, a group of many different organizations, nonprofits, all for the good of parks and governmental sort of work. Part of that meeting also was about what has everybody been doing through COVID, and how has it affected their operations. And the theme was very similar, where obviously everybody at first was like, drop everything and try to figure out how we can be safe and have restrictions in place that keep people from the public safe. And so everybody was frantic about PPE and, getting the necessary things in place that everybody would need to continue to, to operate. The other, really constant theme was that throughout all of this, it was very apparent of how essential recreation, open space kind of services are. So it really reaffirmed, how important space is, open space, and having places and opportunities for people to get outside and exercise and just be outside, and then also ways for people to take advantage of being outside, and how important that is for everybody, and everybody benefits from it. So that was very good too. And there was some, talk kind of about moving forward again about mutual things, and sustainability and stewardship are certainly one of them that everybody has in common. And then also had a Parks Recreation Board meeting last week. And again, it was a meeting that a lot of people we haven't had one for a while. So it was good to see everybody again. Some of the things that are coming forward with that is the bio dock at Kings Highway Park. So there's permitting already in place for that, and the plan for that to move forward in the near future. The Bellevue Bridge, the musical instruments that we that are in this funding year, but that are going in at the parks also. So the permitting's, I think, already been in place for that. And then also there was a short report about the proposed multi-use trail at Cakes Creek Park for kind of novice mountain biking, or taking some of the existing trail that's there and creating a mountain bike trail for novice and beginner riders. So Torque was involved in that with the planning process with Stephanie and Terry, and so that's moving forward again, and the board should get a proposal in the near future about accepting that recommendation. And I think that's it.
Great, Rob. Thank you. Great to hear that Parks and Rec is meeting back again. It's been a while. It's good to hear what they're up to. Thanks. And Mark.
Had a food council meeting last week, and then a Chapel Hill Orange County Visitors Bureau meeting as well. Nothing substantial to report from those meetings. And Mayor Jen, I will leave it to you to summarize the MPO meeting that we both attended, I think, last week. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Matt.
Not a whole lot to report. The TDA did meet, I believe it was last week, or the week before. My weeks are blending together. And one of the good things is we welcomed Kim Tesaro. Thank you for approving her appointment the other week to that as the tourism board representative. And so really what we are starting to work on beginning this summer is getting the tourism board to the same sort of place, or the TDA rather, to the same sort of place that the tourism board is at presently, with more formalized processes, building out a little bit more structure. What do we actually want to accomplish as a tourism development authority? Shannon has pulled relevant documents from other TDAs across the state, so we can kind of view what it is, what kind of goals are there, what are they setting. Obviously, some municipalities that have TDAs like Asheville have a really large budget. We don't have that large of a budget, but really, putting some structure in goals and attaching that to the TDA, as we did with the tourism board. We obviously have really professionalized it. Shannon's been very instrumental in that, but now we want to put some goals to it. And there's a lot of folks in the community who wonder, what does the TDA fund? What are our goals? What is it that we want to accomplish? And so beginning this summer, we'll begin that process.
Thank you, Matt. That sounds like really good work. I look forward to hearing how that unfolds. Thank you. My reports are pretty simple. First, I just wanted to acknowledge that the first census numbers came out today. Y'all probably saw, and North Carolina is gaining a member of Congress. So again, Matt, thank you for all the work that you did trying to get that count in the midst of a pandemic. Much appreciated, and I'll certainly be curious to see what Hillsboro's latest numbers look like. Have no idea if those are even available yet, but I'll be eager to see those. And then the only, I did want to mention that the deadline, just to let folks in the community know that you run into, that the deadline for contesting your reval on property is Friday, April 30th. So just make sure that folks know that, and that there is a special program through the county for people who are 65 and over who are really struggling with that load. So just trying to get the word out that is happening. And then the MPO last week was mostly we had several presentations. We had a presentation on the Wake County Transportation Plan, or the Campo, well, I guess not Campo, it's the Wake County Transportation Plan, the Durham County Transportation Plan, and the Orange County Transportation Plan. And I'm going to summarize that. And then, Mark, if it's okay, I'm going to kick it back to you to give us the kind of the latest update about where the Orange County Transportation Plan is as our fearless representative to that group. But I think it's fair to say that the current focus and conversation in the Orange County Transpo Plan has been in really trying to prioritize the corridor between Chapel Hill and Durham, the 15501 corridor, which is just, you know, a mess, and there's a gaping hole where light rail is going to be. And so what's going to happen there? And then we were also told at the MPO that the Orange County Transportation Group was trying to meet with Durham to talk about, to being sure that we have good connections, and to talk some maybe about the 70 corridor and that piece. And with that, I'll kick it to you, Mark.
Thanks for the reminder on that. I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had the Orange County Transportation Steering Committee had a meeting with Durham City and Durham County elected officials, where we just kind of got together to emphasize our desire to have a stronger connection between Durham specifically and Chapel Hill. We have a consultant working on an updated plan that is still in development, but we felt that it needed a little bit more emphasis on the connectivity between Chapel Hill and Durham. And the draft plan is very comprehensive and is, I think, on the right track. But we just want to make sure that that Chapel Hill Durham connection, in the absence of light rail, is going to be even more important. So I don't think we came up with anything that was out of the ordinary in terms of our mutual desire and commitment to have meaningful connectivity. And we did look at and talk about different kinds of data that look at employment locations and what are the commuting patterns. And we emphasize desire to really understand the connectivity between Durham and Chapel Hill, and that will help us with our planning efforts. So that information is still kind of being rolled around in our heads, and the consultants are looking at that, and will incorporate that into their next draft, which I think will be in May. Yes, Kathleen.
I'm kind of curious, what's the traffic commute patterns, western of Durham to Mebane?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
And it's certainly offline you can take but what are the traffic patterns, and what's that looking like on that Durham Mebane corridor?
We didn't discuss specific patterns, just the need for more data. And there is some really good data from Census Bureau. And I think they were looking at maybe updating kind of what the commute patterns are. If anybody has been part of the Chapel Hill Chamber data review they do once a year, if you've seen those reports of commute patterns, both into Orange County and out of Orange County, and where do they go?
Yeah, I've seen those. I didn't know if there was anything more specific.
Not more specific, but again, the focus of the region is really between Durham and Wake, and kind of going east and maybe south a little bit. So we're still on the kind of the other side, the periphery of that larger commuting pattern, and which is complicated by the fact that Raleigh has its own metropolitan planning organization that's apart from the Durham, Chapel Hill, Orange County. So it's like herding cats in terms of getting the data and making decisions, and making sure that we're, the rising tide is lifting all the boats, not one county at the expense of another county. So I will inquire, Kathleen, and I will let you and everybody else know if there is more up-to-date information about commute patterns that relate to Hillsborough and Mebane. You're welcome.
Looks like Margaret has a question for you, Mark.
Not a question. I was just going to remind the board that there is actually probably about this time next year, we will kick off a corridor study from US 70 that is being jointly funded by Mebane and Orange County and the MPO to look at that entire corridor from a much broader perspective, actually starting in Mebane and coming all the way through. It builds a little bit on our pedestrian study that we did a few years ago, but it is going to be, pretty comprehensive to look at because that's one of the few places where we have right of way. The 70 corridor is like 150 feet, at least 100 feet in some places and 150 feet in some other places as it goes through town. So, just that's coming soon to a station near you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank
Helpful.
you.
And I must say, I do remember what Kathleen said. I remember it quite well. She told it. She told it. That's the truth.
Well, thank you. And we look forward to seeing that study for sure. And I guess that I won't belabor this anymore, except to say that when several months ago, when we got the presentation on commuter rail, there was some data there that showed the Mebane side of things, Mebane to Hillsborough to Durham. And it was it was disappointingly not enough to justify, including Orange in that commuter rail effort at this time. But I'm hopeful that will unfold in the future because it feels like a lot of people, right? But the numbers weren't there yet. But it's an important question. Okay, that is all my updates. And Mark, thank you for giving us that transportation plan piece. And with that, there are no additional staff updates. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, so moved.
I think I might have heard Evelyn move it first, and Kathleen,
Okay,
I heard you let her
second.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And that is unanimous. And I am sorry to say we're not going to make it to midnight like we did 2 weeks ago. Hope everyone finds something restful to do with the rest of your evening. Thank you for your time and the good conversation. Have a good evening. Good night.